All right, last year at this time, we sat down and said we weren't going to overreact to the exhibition game. We weren't going to overreact to an exhibition game. The morning after the first exhibition game of the basketball season last year, we started off the Morning Pit the very next day saying we are not going to overreact to an exhibition game. And of course, we proceeded to spend the next 20 minutes of that Morning Pit overreacting to an exhibition game. And understandably so. And, it became kind of a running joke. We weren't going to overreact to this. Weren't going to overreact to that. Last year, Pitt beat Pitt Johnstown in the exhibition game, 96-60. And we kept claiming we weren't going to overreact. Well, here we are a year later. It's the morning after Pitt's exhibition game. Another one against a Western Pennsylvania team. Another win where they scored in the 90s. Another game that they won by 30-plus points. And I don't have to sort of jokingly say the refrain that we're not going to overreact to an exhibition game, because the reality is, walking out of the Peterson Event Center last night after Pitt's win over Point Park, I didn't find myself really overreacting about anything. Probably because what we saw in that game, which ended up being a 31-point win for Pitt, 93-62. I don't think there was anything all that surprising. I think last year you came out of the exhibition game and you said, holy cow, Bub Carrington, holy cow, Ishmael Leggett. I forget if Jalen Lowe had a big game in that one. Wait, I have both box scores open here. I got to make sure I'm on the right game. Jalen Lowe, played 16 minutes. He scored 8 points. But you had, Will Jeffers went for 8 and 8. Guillermo went for 8 and 8. Hinson, Carrington, Leggett all scored in double figures, as did Jorge Diaz-Graham. Pitt shot of 11 of 34 from three. All this stuff. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they did last year. All I know is that we overreacted to that. But I'm not so inclined to overreact to Pitt's exhibition win this year. That doesn't mean they weren't good. It doesn't mean they didn't look impressive. It doesn't mean there aren't a lot of things to talk about. I just don't find myself really overreacting about it. I think part of it is because we know a lot of these players, the key players who are going to be the key guys for this team, played like the key players. And the newcomers, I think, largely fell in with what we expected them to be, with some exceptions, one where, good and bad. I think the newcomers largely sort of fit in with what we expected them to be. And so I walked out not really with my opinion about this team changed all that much. So we're not going to overreact to an exhibition game. We're going to react to it. We're not going to underreact. We are going to react to it. Let's talk about what we saw in Pitt's win over Point Park in the exhibition game last night. And I know I said we were going to talk about some of the negative things with the football team after we did the positives yesterday. I said we're going to do the negatives today, the reasons for concern. Yesterday was the reasons for optimism. Today is the reasons for concern. We'll see if we get to that. We'll probably have some time at the end, but how much time do we really want to spend on the negatives, right? All right, let's talk a little Pitt basketball and see if we can get in a little football talk as well here on the Morning Pit, the Wednesday edition on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Wednesday here on the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Glad to be with you. I can't believe it's already Wednesday. That means we are 1 day away from this Pitt-Syracuse game at Acrisure Stadium tomorrow night. I know we're going to be talking basketball here today, but let's be honest, there's a lot of excitement and anticipation for that game against Syracuse, and I'm certainly thinking about it a lot. I was talking with people at the game last night, fans and media and whatnot. We were talking about that. We were talking about Pitt basketball as well because we were all at the Pitt basketball game, but we were talking about Pitt-Syracuse because I think we're all looking forward to it and all pretty excited to see what this game is and how this team looks. Coming back from the off week, coming back from the game against Cal, and heading into the second half of the season, which is decidedly more challenging than the first half of the season was. So a lot of anticipation for that one. Definitely looking forward to it and excited to see what that game brings. But I think we all, or at least I know, I was excited going into the exhibition game last night. Excited to see what this team could bring with this Pitt basketball team. And every year you're going to have, you always have newcomers. It's college sports. You're always going to have newcomers in some form or fashion. Freshmen, we're always sort of the traditional newcomers. Nowadays, you've got transfers. You're going to have who knows how many. You're going to have multiple transfers every year. New guys who are going to show up there. For Pitt, there's a couple guys, obviously Cam Corn and Damian Dunn. From the transfer portal, there's a couple of freshmen. There's one or two guys who redshirted last year that we never really saw. So there were a lot of new faces to see at the Peterson Event Center last night, and it was certainly interesting to see those guys, and we have thoughts on just about all of them. But the biggest thing I walked away from the building thinking, and I thought it during the game as well, is like Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett are the guys. And we knew they were the guys. We knew they were the ones who were leading. I mean, there's a reason that I requested an interview with those two guys together. And we put it on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com on Saturday, this past Saturday. If you haven't gotten a chance to check it out, go watch it. There's a reason I requested to interview those two guys together, because they are the leaders of this team. And we'll continue to have discussions and debate on the message boards about whose team is it? Is it Jalen Lowe's team or is it Ishmael Leggett's team? And I'm sort of the mind that it's Jalen Lowe's team. But look, Ishmael Leggett is going to make a lot of plays for this team. And he's going to score a lot of points. And he's going to be a big-time contributor for this team. As he goes, so too will the team go. And the team's only going to go as far as Ishmael Leggett and Jalen Lowe take it. So... And we all knew that, right? That's why we were having these discussions about whose team is it and everything. We knew that it was Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett's team, that, you know, they're the leaders, they're the main playmakers. And I think what we saw last night just further reinforced it. You know, Point Park was game. You know, like they came in ready to play, and I don't think Pitt's defense was really ready to play in the first half last night. Yeah, Pitt had an 8-point lead at halftime, but it was 50-42. Point Park made, 18 field goals in the first half. They shot 48.6% in the first half. I think they were 5 of 11 from 3 in the first half. Point Park was making a lot of shots, and they were hitting a lot of shots. And you know, it's credit to them for playing well, but I don't think Pitt's defense was really awake when the game started. Or Jeff Capel said after the game that he thought that sometimes guys can get too excited, and you know, when it's the first game, and then sometimes when you get too excited, then you get sort of tired really easily, and so maybe that was the issue. He said that, you know, you could have some of that. Obviously, they cleaned things up in the second half. You know, after shooting 5 of 11 from 3 in the first half, Point Park was 1 of 13 from 3 in the second half. After making 18 field goals in the first half, they made 9 field goals in the second half. Pitt's defense was much better after halftime. It was much tighter. It was much more reactive. It seemed like there was better communication. I mean, they played better overall defensively. But while it took them 20 minutes to figure that out, while it took them 20 minutes to get the defense in order, Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett made sure that Pitt never really was in danger of ceding the lead and potentially even losing to Point Park. Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett, I think, scored a combined 31 points in the first half. Pitt scored 50. Those guys had 31. They were always making plays. By the end of it, Leggett had 24 points and Lowe scored 22. Ishmael Leggett, in addition to his 24 points, had 9 rebounds and 5 assists. Lowe just had 2 assists in the game, but he also had 4 steals to go with his 22 points. Leggett was 8 of 9 from the field. Lowe was 7 of 13. Leggett was 3 of 3 from 3. And 5 of 6 from the free throw line. Lowe didn't make either of his 3-point attempts. He attempted 2 and missed both, but then he went 8 of 8 from the free throw line. So I just read the whole box score to you of those two guys. And I did it because the point is important. That those two guys are the key here. They're the key for how this team is going to go. And if they're playing an inferior opponent, and that inferior opponent is making things a little too close for comfort, those two guys are going to make the plays to take over. And this could be, we're getting close to the overreaction territory. This could be one of the things that can separate this year's team from last year's team. There are a lot of things that I think there are some things that I think last year's team did better than this year's team. And I'm not sure that this year's team can really close the gap in that on a few things. But what I do think is this year's team with Lowe and Leggett has 2 guards with a ton of college experience who I think can really take over a game and elevate the team. And when they're in danger of, falling behind or the other team's going on a run, those guys can make the plays to get you out of it. I think when you look at last year, obviously they had Blake Hinson as the big scorer, and he could change the momentum of a game in a heartbeat with his shot. And he did many times over, and he was a great player because of it. But the guards, you had two freshmen in Bub Carrington and Jalen Lowe, and you had Ishmael Leggett, a transfer who just got here. And so while there were plenty of times when those guys did take over the game, when those guys did make the big play to elevate the team, to put a stop to the opponent's run, or to just give Pitt whatever boost it really needed, and those three did that all season long, I think they're better positioned to do it more consistently, more effectively, and almost sort of more on demand this year because they're returning players. They're returning starters. I guess Leggett's not a returning starter, but you're not keeping him out of the starting lineup. Damian Dunn can come off the bench. Brandon Cummings can come off the bench. Zach Austin can come off the bench. Amsal Delilich can come off the bench. All those guys who could potentially play that third guard spot can come off the bench. Lowe and Leggett have to be your starters. Like somebody said it to me over the summer. I remember I was talking to somebody around the program about Ishmael Leggett, and they were like, look, he's not trying to be the sixth man of the year again, because I don't know if that's really the kind of award you want to repeat as. You want to be a starter. You want to move into that starting lineup. And I think the way Ishmael Leggett played last night, and again, it was against Point Park, so we don't want to overreact too much to it, but I think that the control he had, the way he attacked, I mean, even if you're playing against Point Park, whose coach sort of proudly stated that they're moving up to Division II, or they've moved up to Division II. Even if you're playing Point Park, if you go out and you go 8 of 9 from the floor, 3 of 3 from 3, and you put up 24 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists, that's pretty good. Like that's a pretty good game where you were really in control of the game. And I think Ishmael Leggett was. And so you've got him with a year of playing at Pitt under his belt. You've got Jalen Lowe as a sophomore with a year of playing college basketball under his belt. That's not really what they had last year. They didn't have two guys like that. They had two freshmen, and they had a transfer who just arrived. Now they've got the transfer who just arrived, and they've got the freshman, with the transfer being Damian Dunn and the freshman being Brandon Cummings, who pops up on screen perfect timing. But you've got these two guys who have the experience, they have the talent, and I think the cojones to want to put this team on their back and carry it. And I think we saw it last night. Again, that game was never really in doubt. It was never really going to be all that close. But one of the reasons that it never really got all that close is that Ishmael Leggett and Jalen Lowe wouldn't let it get close. So that was one of my big takeaways from the game. But I think we knew that going in. We knew their status on the team. We knew what roles they were going to fill. And we just saw it in action last night. Of course, we also got to see some newcomers in action for the first time. Cam Corrin, Damian Dunn, and Brandon Cummings, as well as Amdi Najai. And I got to get the pronunciation of his name down. I heard them say it at the game last night, and I need to – I don't want to mess that up anymore. Plus, we got to see Papa Amadou Kante get his first action after taking a red shirt last year due to injury. Got to see Marlon Barnes out there, although I think he might have played in the exhibition game a year ago. He did. He played 4 minutes in the exhibition game last year. He played 4.5 minutes this year. Finished with 1 point, 1 foul, 2 rebounds, and I guess that's it. In 4.5 minutes of play for Marlon Barnes, he got 1 point on a free throw. But we got to see a bunch of newcomers, and I think the most prominent ones: Damian Dunn, Cam Corrin, Brandon Cummings, largely looked, again, they pretty much looked like what you expected them to be. I thought Damian Dunn looked like a veteran guard out there. Good defensive presence, a guy who can make some plays, can hit some jump shot or a floater, can also run the point, which I think he did a few times when he was on the court with Cummings, when Jalen Lowe wasn't out there. And maybe that's the best role for Damian Dunn, to kind of run the point when Lowe needs a break, in addition to playing with Lowe. but did a good job passing and did a good job finishing. Let me see. Dunn ended the game with 6 points on 3 of 7 shooting, so maybe he didn't do as good a job finishing as I thought. 1 rebound, 3 assists, no turnovers. So nice, solid game from Damian Dunn. Cam Corrin was a real storyline in the game, particularly in the first half. He was not good in the first half. I think he was 1 of 5 from the floor in the first half. And if you read the message boards, if you were reading the live game thread, people weren't very excited about Cam Corrin. Weren't excited about him being in the starting lineup. Weren't excited about him getting as many minutes as he is likely to get this season. And weren't excited about him being as featured in the offense as he is likely to be featured this season. Then he comes out in the second half and shoots 6 of 7, scores 12 points, and just looked like a different player. And maybe it's as simple as like, well, in the second half the shots were falling, and in the first half they weren't. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's how what it really just boils down to. But he just looked more confident. He looked more under control. His shots were falling, his jump shots, but he was also finishing at the rim on like alley-oops and dunk opportunities. The second half Cam Corrin is what Pitt was signing up for, right? Because that's what they saw against it. He scores 12 points in the second half. He had 25 against Pitt last year. So, I mean, like that was the player that they saw, and I think they liked him even before he dropped 25 on Pitt last season. But I think what he did in the second half was much closer to what Pitt was hoping for when they recruited Cam Corrin as a transfer from Florida State. Corrin finished with 14 points and 11 rebounds, so you got the double-double in the exhibition game. He did turn the ball over 3 times, but he had 2 steals, 1 block. Maybe it was his shot was blocked. And he shot 7 of 12 from the floor. He didn't shoot any free throws. I think that's going to be something interesting to watch. I think with the way he plays and as physical as he is around the basket, he's probably going to find himself on the line, and that those could be crucial situations. But overall, particularly in the second half, Cam Corrin looked like what you would want Cam Corrin to look. Or how you would want Cam Corrin to look. And Point Park had some size. They had some bigger guys out there, which I think created an interesting challenge, an interesting matchup for Corrin. But I think in the second half, he did to Point Park what you would want your big guy to do to Point Park. And I mean, we're not going to spend too much time drawing comparisons and whatnot to last year, but I will say that in 17 minutes, which is 10 minutes less than Corrin played. In 17 minutes against UPJ last year, Federico had 5 and 5. And again, I mean, like that's not it was he played 17, Corrin played almost 28. So it's not a perfect comparison, and it doesn't really serve much to make those comparisons, but it's interesting to note. I think Cam Corrin did what you would want him to do against Point Park. And I think you want him to do more of that against Radford. Elsewhere, as far as newcomers, I mean, Brandon Cummings, I think you can see the athleticism and the speed. You can see the nice shooting touch. What Brandon Cummings needs to do is just settle down and be part of the team, be part of the offense. I think there were a couple of times that he drove to his left and tried like off-balance jump shots and contested shots early in the shot clock. Because I think he operated as a point a few times and. It just wasn't necessary. He didn't need to take those shots. He didn't need to take the shots like that. There were opportunities to pass, and there were opportunities to just. If he was really intent on finding his own shot, he had other opportunities to do so. He didn't need to take an off-balance fadeaway jumper or something like that. He could have found his shot a little bit smoother. Look, there's a nice picture of him shooting a floater there, like those kinds of shots. And I think he did more of that in the second half. Cummings finished with 8 points, no rebounds, but he had 2 assists, 1 turnover, and 2 steals. He shot 3 of 8 from the floor, 1 of 2 from 3, and 1 of 2 from the free throw line. I think that's actually a picture of him making a 3 right there that just popped up. All these photos are just. It's really lining up nicely with what we're talking about here. But I mean, as the fourth guard, I think Cummings looked like he's going to be pretty good. I think he's going to be a pretty solid fourth guard option for Pitt. He's not going to play as many minutes as Lowe and Leggett and Dunn, but they don't need him. They're not going to need him to play as many minutes as Lowe and Leggett and Dunn. And so I think they'll be able to get what they need out of Brandon Cummings, and I think he'll get better as the season goes on. I think game after game, half after half even, he's going to keep improving and learning. He's very young. He's as a freshman, but I think he's just going to keep getting better. They needed Bub Carrington to be the guy last year right off the bat. And we talked about this, at different points through the offseason when we talk about Pitt basketball. Like, they don't need Brandon Cummings to be the man right off the bat the way they needed Bub Carrington to be the man right off the bat. Bub Carrington, and this ties back to what we said before about having Lowe and Leggett on this team, that creates the luxury to use Cummings in spots and put him in for the minutes that he earns, not just because you don't have anybody else. You need a guard to go on the court, and so he's going to have to play 25, 30 minutes or something like that. Well, that's not going to be the case. Injuries, knock on wood about injuries. That's not going to be the case this year for Brandon Cummings. He's going to be able to move along at his own pace and sort of get the minutes that he earns. And that's good. I think that's a good situation. Otherwise, I mean, the Twins were firing away, combined 2 of 11 from 3 from Jorge and Guillermo. Obviously, they're going to need to do better than that, particularly if they're going to shoot 11 threes between them in a game. They're going to need to make more than 2. I think they will, but that's got to improve. Guillermo did finish with 6 rebounds. Played a little mix of power forward and center. Was interesting to see how that worked. He started at power forward. He started as the 4 because he was on the court with Corin. But then he came in at different points with Papa Conti on the court or Omni Najai and slid sort of like to more of a center role. It wasn't a ton, but I think I counted 18 different lineup combinations last night. So obviously using a lot of guys in a lot of roles and getting a lot, seeing who fits where and who works well together. It was interesting. They started the game with Lowe, Leggett, Zach Austin, Guillermo, and Cam Corin. The second half, usually Jeff Capel goes with the starting lineup again to start the second half. He didn't in this game. He went with Lowe, Leggett, Damian Dunn, Guillermo, and Corin. Dunn replacing Austin. Austin eventually came in the second half, about 5 minutes in, 4.5 minutes into the second half. He was the first sub and came in and played a lot of minutes. Zach Austin had, almost 20 minutes of playing time. He scored 4 points, 2 of 5 from the floor, missed 2 3-point attempts. He had 5 rebounds, no assists, 1 turnover, 1 steal, 1 block. We'll see what comes out of Zach Austin. We'll see what Zach Austin's able to provide as the season goes on. The return of Amsal Delilich, which Jeff Capel said, hopefully could be for the opener. I don't know if it's going to actually work out that he makes it back for the opener, but the return of Delilich could have an interesting effect on Zach Austin's playing time and opportunities, because I could see if Delilich is everything I believe him to be, which he may or may not be, I could see him squeezing Zach Austin a little bit for some of those minutes at that position with the 2 guards. You have the 2 guards, and then you have Delilich or Austin, and then you have your forwards. I could see that working out if Zach Austin can't produce more consistently. But lots of time. And again, we're not going to overreact to the exhibition game. I think there's a lot to talk about because it's the first time we see this team playing against another team in the 2024-25 season. But obviously we'll have a lot more to talk about after the Radford game in a couple weeks. That's coming up on November 4th. So that'll be here before you know it. And then we'll really be in basketball season at that point. So, we'll talk more, obviously, as time goes on. But there was a game last night, so I figured we'd talk about it. And, of course, we ran out of time without any football talk. But believe me, we'll have a lot of football talk tonight on the live show at 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammett will get together for an hour of Pitt Sports Talk, and we'd love to have you join us. And we'll talk a lot of football to get ready for Pitt Syracuse. And then, of course, tomorrow's Morning Pitt, we'll have a lot of Pitt football talk as well. in addition to some thoughts on Alan Green, because we're going to have a chance later today to talk to Alan Green, his first press conference in Pittsburgh, Pitt's new athletic director. I'm looking forward to that. We'll have video of that here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And I'll have some thoughts on it. And we'll probably talk about it on the live stream tonight, and then again on the Morning Pitt tomorrow. So lots to do, lots to talk about, and lots of Pitt video content right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So do me a favor. I haven't asked you. I waited until 25 minutes into this video. Do me a favor. Like this video and subscribe. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget to check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. Pittsburgh.rivals.com to get all of your Pitt sports coverage. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Hope it's been a great week for you so far. We're almost to football game day. It's just one day away. I can't wait. I think you're probably excited too. But I appreciate you tuning in for some basketball talk this morning or today, whenever you watch this video. Like the video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We will see you tonight on the live stream, and then we'll be back with you again tomorrow morning for the Morning Pit, the game day edition of the Morning Pit, right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.